Very good evening, friends. Meeting up again after a big gap. So, dear friends, we are discussing Robert's philosophy and we have discussed in length all four chapters devoted to the Sora Mayasm. He has started with disease classification and some part of the Sora. Then he explained all the manifestations of Sora in relation with the Sorosyphilitic Mayasm. Then in third chapter, he has explained his own hypothesis, Sora or deficiency, in order to explain to the world the scientific concept behind it. And in the fourth chapter, some manifestations of the Sora that he tried to explain that even though there are no manifestations and still we can locate the Sora and we can treat that Sora so that disastrous effects which can be caused with the help of Sora can be prevented with the help because of that. So four chapters which are very important related with Sora we have finished. Let us start with the chapter number 26, that is the disease classification, the syphilitic stigma. Next chapters are related with the venereal miasms. And there are some common elements with the venereal miasms related with psychosis as well as syphilis. And that's what we have to learn. Here, we can understand many things. When we learn the syphilitic stigma as well as the gonorrheal stigma or psychotic stigma, we're going to learn many aspects of the miasms. So, why certain people all of a sudden starts getting a deep-seated pathology? The answer you will going to get in these two miasms. So let us start with the chapter number 26. Disease classification, the syphilitic stigma. The venereal stigma, or as Hahnemann called them, miasms, are fundamentally infections of specific nature. It is well to bear in mind the basis of all infection and of all chronic diseases before we can properly understand the workings of the stigmatic disease. Let us consider the syphilis, for instance. This is one of the comparatively modern diseases and it is the basis of many constitutional troubles. Syphilis is, from its inception, the constitutional disturbance. Syphilis is supposed to be contracted from an impure coition. Much of the susceptibility and lowering of the defense towards the specific poison is developed and maintained because of the mental attitude of an individual in that in its very inception it is violation of the moral standards and therefore reacts upon and lowers the vitality. So now he starts explaining about this syphilitic stigma. Basically, this disease is new. This has started from the 15th century, and the first person who contracted the syphilis was a American shepherd whose name was Syphilius, and his name is given to this specific stigma, to this disease. Syphilis itself is a constitutional disease. This is the sentence which he has made. Why it has made? Because this disease ends with the life of the human being. Syphilis is the sexually transmitted disease caused because of Treponema pallidum and it runs through the four phases. The primary syphilis. Primary syphilis is the syphilis, it is a primary sore or a single painless hard ulcer either on male or female genitalia with horizontal group of bilateral horizontal group of inguinal lymphadenopathy is presented in the primary syphilis. It is also called as primary sore or primary chancre. That if you try to suppress this manifestation with the help of some mercurial preparations, the painless hard ulcer disappears. Patient feels better. He feels as if cured, but it never gets cured. After some time, it reappears, and when it reappears along with two important manifestations. One from psoric miasm, that is maculopapular rash on extremities as well as buccal cavity, psoric manifestation, and second, that is the condylometallata, that is the flat warts around the genitals, a psychotic manifestation. So simple syphilis now becomes complex syphilis in secondary syphilis. So secondary syphilis is the complex where you get the manifestations of original syphilis along with psoric and psychotic manifestation. So if you try to remove that primary sore with the help of mercurial preparations, if you remove the condylomata with the help of surgery or by cauterization, and if you apply any ointment on the maculopapular rash, again patient goes into the state where he doesn't have any symptoms. But disease is increasing internally without producing any manifestations externally. And that stage is called as latent syphilis or a tertiary syphilis, where disease is increasing internally in spite of there are no symptoms. And when after some lag, after some time, when it reappears basically with the bigger pathology. It either involves the heart producing cardiomyopathy, ending with the life of the human being, or either it affects the central nervous system, producing tabes dorsalis paralysis, ultimately ending with the life of the human being. These are big two manifestations of quaternary syphilis. So see, this whole syphilis, whole concept, if you understand, it goes through the four phases, ending with the life of the human being. That's why it is called as constitutional syphilis, affecting the life of the human being. And this is itself, day by day, lowers the vitality of an individual and affecting the individual. So this, in the introductory part, he tries to explain about that. Then they have used one important word over there. Syphilis is caused because of impure coition. Impure coition means a person who is already suffering from this disease and had a sex with another disease, another person suffers from such a disorder. And this is called as a effects of impure coition, and he contracts that. Kent has explained one important thing behind that. He has explained that if the person knows that he can contract the disease, why he still becomes immoral? Why there is a lack of morality? And Kent says that syphilis is there already in his mind, because of which he is frivolous. He goes to prostitute and catches the disorder. So syphilis is prior to the syphilitic stigma, and that concept Kent has elaborated in very nice manner. So we have to understand both the things. We have to understand that syphilis disease is produced because of Treponema pallidum, but before Treponema pallidum, there is syphilitic miasm present in the human being and in the form of diseased mind. Let us consider what happens after an impure question. Prophylactics seemingly have very little to do with preventing the development of this condition. But there remains a period of about 3 weeks after exposure when no symptoms or manifestations of any kind shows themselves. This is the period when disease is taking hold on the system constitutionally and while appearing producing no symptom. Then the vital energy undertakes to expel the poison by forming a chancre on some part of the body surface, usually the genital organs. In other words, the vital energy is attempting to push out the enemy, and so long as this chancre remains on the surface, as an expression of the inward turmoil, no constitutional symptoms are there. Very clearly, he has mentioned one thing. When syphilis has to happen, it takes period about 3 weeks after exposure. That is called as prodromal period. So there are no symptoms, nothing happens. It takes 3 weeks after treponema enters inside body, and thereafter the disease starts manifesting. Sometimes it becomes months or years also. If the patient's vigor is good, patient cannot have it immediately. But minimum at least 3 weeks time lag period is there. And when it first time manifests, generally it appears on the surface. Generally, it appears on surface, specifically on genitals, male or female genital, in the form of primary chancre. That is an ulcer of syphilitic miasm called as primary chancre. It is a hard painless ulcer. This is the post manifestation which appears over there, and because of which the constitutional effects never happens inside. In order to prevent the affection of the internal vital organs, the poison is thrown on the surface through this primary channel. But being a human being, considering ourselves as a more talented, we try to apply something local, try to remove that eruption from that place, try to apply the mercurial preparations over that, and because of which this manifestation where the stigma is throwing out, the poison is throwing out in the form of that primary sore, gets suppressed, and then it enters inside, producing the affections of the internal vital organs. Then the disease becomes constitutional. Till that period, it has not affected the constitution, but now it starts affecting the constitution. One must understand this process. This is very important, this thing. All three miasms have their manifestations on the surface. In case of Sora, in the form of each. In case of syphilis, in the form of primary Shankar. In case of psychosis, in the form of figworts or yellowish mucopollulant discharge through the mucous membranes of urethra. But it is on the surface. And if it is on the surface, then why do we suppress? Because of which the constitutional effects of the miasms never happens. But once you start suppressing it, it enters inside. This state may last for months, even for years, provided it is not suppressed. Very important, underline this sentence. If primary Shankar remains over there for months together, years together, patient is survived. He is not getting affected internally. In just the degree that this Shankar does not does not suffer interferences, does it represent the ability of vital pulmonary to cope with the intruder. The general treatment among the physicians is to cauterize or treat locally this manifestation, such treatments tending to immediately dry the chancre and throw the poison back by suppression into the innermost recesses of the system. Then it is that a chain of symptoms begins to develop, showing that the vital energy is profoundly disturbed and that it is helpless to cope unaided with the enemy. So how this disease transforms from the less important organ to the more important organ and affecting the constitution, affecting the vital organ, that's what he is explaining. It gets uh, it gets suppressed from that area because of local treatments, and because of which it enters inside. And once it enters inside, without specific homeopathic treatment, patient cannot be cured. Otherwise, all treatments available over there in the modern science, they are only palliative or suppressive modes of treatment. So this is very important. There is a need to treat the syphilis. Specifically, there is a need to treat the chronic diseases. Acute diseases are self-curative disorders many times, but chronic always requires help, always requires aid. And what he says that is very important in bracket that he has explained about the modern science. Now the investigators in the ordinary school of medicine have begun to question whether Shankar is not a provision of nature to counteract syphilitic poison. Their theory being that Shankar actually produces within itself antibodies that act defensively against the specific inroads of the disease. So what now modern science is considering? That's what Robert is explaining. Modern science is considering this till the Shankar is there, it used to produce the antibodies in order to defend the poison. Very important entity, very important thought. But still we try to suppress it. And once it is suppressed, it used to affect the internal human. So one must understand this concept, and those concepts we used to find it out very often on in our day-to-day practice. What he says further, usually the next step taken by nature is to produce an eruption on the body. If this manifestation is in turn treated by suppressive measures, the disease attacks the internal organs, tending always to attack that part of the organism which is least able to resist. So the part which is susceptible gets affected more. The rest of the parts which resist never happens, so never gets affected. This is common thing. It may be the central nervous system, or it may be arterial system and the heart. It may be the liver or the intestinal tract. So the vital organs generally gets affected once you try to suppress this external eruption. Any or all of these tissues of the body feels the deadening influence of this intruder. These manifestations may be suppressed in one place after another, so that man lives out his days with this incubus in his system, ever ready to develop some new manifestations at the most trivial provocation. So see what he is saying. These manifestations may be suppressed in one place after another, so that man lives out his days with this incubus in the system, ever ready to develop some new manifestations at the most trivial provocation. So day by day, when human being is suffering and affecting more and more vital organs, once you try to suppress it, from the surface it enters and affects the most important organs. Grief, sorrow, and worry are potent influences to develop these manifestations. See what he's saying? The some exciting causes are sufficient to produce internal affections at that time. Till that period, he was normal. Till the eruption was there, he was normal. But once you suppress it, then slightest provocation is sufficient to produce hazardous effect. It might be grief, it might be sorrow, it might be any worry, are potent influences to develop these manifestations, or it may be exposure to the elements, a slight accident, stress of business, or stress of business relationship, or any of many other causes that starts the irritation. But unless this is made by art of similar antisyphilitic remedy, he passes his days in discomfort, distress, and comes to a premature old age. See what he is explaining. Once these things happens to be there, it starts affecting most vital organs inside. It starts producing irritation. Unless you give a proper antisyphilitic treatment, otherwise it goes on affecting more and more internal affections, deadening pathology, and premature old age. Patient goes into the stage of degeneration very fast. This stigma always produces fast degeneration. So osteoarthritis, which used to happen in the late age of the human being after 65, 70 earlier. Now patients are affecting at the age of 40 because of this miasm. So early degeneration always indicates this miasm in background. So early osteoarthritis is definitely an indication of syphilitic stigma. Early cervical spondylosis, early lumbar spondylosis is always an indication of the syphilitic stigma. We must know all those things. Those are very important. So he is explaining exactly how the process runs. Once you throw it inside from outside, it always affects and it always produces a damage to the internal economy. So what he is explaining over there is how the stigma affects the constitution of the human being, producing the constitutional symptoms of the syphilitic miasm. And if this happens, you only require homeopathic treatment. No other treatment is sufficient to cure such types of patients. It always requires antisyphilitic remedy. So this is an introduction to learn about the syphilitic miasm. Certain aspects of syphilitic miasm we have learned. Then tomorrow we'll learn further aspects of this miasm, how it presence in each and every organ, what damage it used to produce over there, that we're going to learn in tomorrow's session. So that's all for today, and we'll meet tomorrow directly, not in the evening session. So good
Thank you very much,
evening.
sir.
Thank you.